Hi, my name is Dr. Jimmy Fernandez. Really happy to share with you some of the lessons that we've learned, not just in Columbus, Ohio, but throughout the country. We're going to be presenting with Melinda Swan with Anchored to Hope about some of the opportunities that we have beyond just merely treating our patients with medications and what we traditionally do in a correctional healthcare setting. Thank you. So before we get started, I wanted to make clear some definitions. And substance use disorder, when we talk about that, there's alcohol, there's opioid, there's stimulant use and abuse dependency. And throughout the last 10 to 12 years, we've seen in corrections and in the community an increase in the prevalence or in the frequency in which we see those individuals in our setting. In one report by the Bureau of Prisons, it was cited that 63% of sentenced individuals have a substance use disorder. When you bake that in and combine that with the mortality of that patient population as compared to the general patient population in corrections, you can see that the rise in mortality, both in the communities and in the correctional healthcare settings, although going up, is disproportionately going up with this because of this patient population. I think throughout my presentation, and Melinda will touch base on it as well, I think we're going to start seeing that as we start treatment and we screen these individuals, we uncover behavioral health conditions that either have been untreated, or I'm going to show you, at least from our experience and my testimony today, really undiagnosed conditions being identified for the first time. So some definitions, just like I promised. Medication-assisted treatment, we talked about treating the specific substance use disorder, and there is continuation and there is induction. Continuation, as the name implies, is someone who is already on MAT therapy in the community, and in the correctional healthcare setting, that treatment is not interrupted and continued, which is different from induction. Induction, as the name implies, is started de novo, new. We commence that therapy in the correctional healthcare setting. Obviously, there's some screening, structured is required, a lot of teamwork is required to execute that. And you are going to walk through that journey with us as how we accomplish that and what that kind of looks like and what it takes. I also wanted to contrast that from medical detoxification. And for detox, I think we're probably more familiar with that process. And that implies that somebody with a substance use disorder, number one, by definition, comes in acutely with an acute intoxication. And that rather than continuing therapy, that patient is medically monitored and allowed to detoxify with support of the patient's withdrawal symptoms and really close observation for the development of any complications. So I wanted to share with you our experience, and this is specific to Franklin County in Ohio. And this is the average, the quarterly average number of intakes and the subsequent CWA. And on the left-hand corner, lower corner, you'll see a text box with the abbreviations for CWA, CWA-B, COWS, SPMH. But in going through this, on average, we're seeing a higher prevalence or a higher amount of patients that screen positive for alcohol and opioid use disorder. And what I want to demonstrate here is that in identifying that, we're also seeing as I will use my cursor. As we're also seeing here, the amount of self-perceived mental health issues, I think is what really shocked us. And I think while you're seeing where over here in this section, the ARMOR average, the quarterly average, and the percentage increases. I'd love to have some feedback from you all attending. Are you guys seeing the same type of data? That the patients that you're screening for alcohol, benzos, opioids, really even more recent, are screening positive for behavioral health issues and requiring a mental health evaluation or follow-up. We are significantly, and I think this bottom number is important too, because these are follow-up appointments as well. So not only is the number of overall appointments for behavioral health team to screen, to evaluate higher, but the follow-up is also higher. So I think back to the previous slide of identifying undiagnosed or untreated conditions, I wanted to share that with you. This is real data, and we're seeing how that's affecting our staffing levels, our treatment, and how we're thoughtful managing our patients. Just briefly talking about ASAM's consensus statement on drug testing and when we should continue, when we should stop. I think this is important to talk about in this meeting because from a clinical standpoint, if we don't do a good job and maybe cease treatment, I think what we do afterwards and how we re-engage with services like Melinda, like community resources, we haven't tucked our patient in, so to speak, to allow for the best outcome possible. So I think it really is helpful to have the Department of Health and Human Services, ASAM, communicate, hey, somebody can have a dirty drug test, and that doesn't mean we just stop treatment. I think that's really important for all of us to appreciate. And I think before I turn it over to Melinda, what I wanted to mention two things. Number one, it really takes an integrated approach to be successful. And we talked about, I showed you our numbers, and one of the shifts that we are making more recently is the use of long-acting injectables in a correctional healthcare settings. That is the product Vivitrol and Sublocade, among two of the long-acting injectable products. And I think having tools like that at our disposal allow us to streamline, make things easier for our nursing team, potentially make things safer for both our security partners. And we're hoping to have enough data to demonstrate risk reduction in all-cause morbidity and mortality. We really do believe that it will impact that. That's our hope. And then hopefully, like I mentioned, we tuck the patient in so that they're able to, in the acute period, not be focused so much on where am I getting my next fix, but to have that moment of clarity, work with our behavioral health team, and then hand over to a resource in corrections or outside of corrections, like Anchored to Hope. And Melinda, want to hand this off. I hope I did a good job communicating what we do in our four walls. I'll turn it over to you.
So first of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Fernandez. I believe what he and Arbor Health are doing in places like the Franklin County Jail are literally the future of how we're going to help people return from incarceration and other systems, criminal justice systems, to successful lives at greater rates and greater numbers. And let's face it, that's really what brings us all here today, is the concept and belief that our system will benefit in millions of ways when we're better able to help people find a successful path to recovery and stay on that path, avoid recidivizing, avoid relapse, maintain those family relationships, stay in the community, become productive citizens. That's really what we're all here for. What I came to address today specifically are some of the new tools that are on the marketplace that can help you both reduce recidivism and promote recovery, and do so in ways that complement and supplement other parts of the system. They are not a replacement. Let me emphasize this. They're not a replacement for medically assisted treatment in particular, nor necessarily for cognitive behavioral therapy, although they can be a complement and supplement to cognitive behavioral therapy, which we'll talk about. Next slide, please. So as Dr. Fernandez said, we all know this. The numbers are a little bit different depending on who you talk to, whether it's 63 or 65 to 70%, we know that people who are incarcerated very frequently, more times than not, have both a mental health issue and or an addiction issue, a co-occurring disorder. Many times one led to the other. And often at times, if you do not deal with all aspects of that problem, there's a very good chance they may pop back into the system. Next slide. And these numbers continue to emphasize this. You know, one of the things that I thought was fascinating is, according to the Council of State Governments Justice Center, 45% of state prison admissions nationwide result from probation, parole, or technical violations, meaning that on any given day, 280,000 people in prison, nearly 1 in 4, are there because of a supervision violation. Now, overlap that supervision violation with the fact that 2/3 or more are dealing with substance abuse and mental illness issues, and you begin to see how we have to be more holistic in our thinking if our end goal is to help people stay on a positive path. Next slide. So there's also some other factors here, of course, that really impact your system and your work, and that need to be acknowledged. And that is that we all know there's a lot of staff training involved in dealing with some of the populations of criminally involved people, justice involved people. We know that stigma is a major issue. We know there's issues with turnover, there's lack of resources, there's workforce shortages, there's fragmented reentry services, there's a lack of funding, a whole plethora of things that make the work that you do particularly challenging, but that can be helped at least in part by technology. Next slide. And so again, as we think about how to deal with, as Dr. Fernandez referenced, the underlying mental health issues that probably more than likely contributed to the ability to start doing self-medicating, which then contributed to criminal behavior, we really have to think holistically about the solutions. And so it does include CBT, it does include CMT, it does include MAT, it does include follow-up care, and it can include technology as well. Next slide. So in the last 10 years, there have been a whole movement of change happening on the front of behavioral intervention technologies, which is another name for using your phone and web-based applications to provide behavioral health care. There's a class called digital therapeutics. These are kind of a step up in the spectrum, if you will, in that to be a therapeutic, you need to be FDA approved and therefore follow certain FDA procedures, which is different than a mental health intervention or an intervention technology, which may be more of a recovery support type of tool. There's also a whole class of things now called immersive therapeutics. Some call it VRX. And that is where we're really seeing a lot of fascinating work involving virtual reality as a tool, again, for mental health treatment. I thought that Tim Rudolph's quote from Meta for Me was worth sharing again. They're not necessarily a replacement, but they're another option to get effective treatments into the hands of patients who need them. And for me, let's go to the next slide. This is an 8-year journey that started off with an understanding that we may never have enough clinicians, we may never have enough beds, we may never have enough great providers like Armor Health to deal with the numbers of people who are afflicted by this disease. But what we can do is come up with tools that can be scalable, that can be cost efficient, that can be convenient, that's stigma-free, and still provide some level of support that helps them stay in recovery. As this quote from Northwestern School of Medicine said, because of high prevalence and chronic shortages of providers, there is a role for digital mental health to play in our healthcare system. Next slide, please. And again, I just identified some of the advantages or benefits that behavioral intervention technologies can provide for you. You can use them to create a virtual peer community so that people literally can connect either virtually or in real life with folks among their peer groups, similar to AA and lots of other groups that we know can be very important to recovery. They're available 24/7. Relapse doesn't happen at 2 in the afternoon most of the time. It happens at 2 a.m. when clinicians and others cannot be there. So having some crisis intervention technologies where people can get immediate help in off hours, really important. They're scalable, so they become much more cost effective. A court in Baltimore that received a $1.5 million federal grant said they were excited they could serve 50 more people. A behavioral intervention technology can serve thousands of people and serve them well, provided that all the content is updated. It can augment staff. Many of the technologies allow you to track the usage rates of them, to understand what people are using them for, so they can become one more way to stay in touch with the population you're working with, but in real time and at minimal cost. They can be a great step down tool. We know one of the most dangerous times for people is when they are trying to step down from incarceration and environments where they're relatively protected and regimented and away from the world that led them into some of the decisions that were made previously. Having a step down tool they can take with them in their pocket and use whenever they need is one more way of trying to make sure that they continue to stay on a good path. And then, of course, as I mentioned, real-time connection data. You can get hard numbers and produce them both for your own analysis, your own staff, as well as for reporting for grants. Let's go to the next slide, please. Virtual reality. A lot of people think of virtuality as a game, and it certainly has its gaming efficacy. But let's take it apart for a minute. I mentioned to you that has now been known as VRX. There's a book about that was written by Dr. Bernard Siegel from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. But the point that really comes down to when it comes to VR is that in our brains, we do not have the capacity to do two things at once. So when we live in a VR environment, we're in a VR environment. When we live in the real world, we live in the real world. Those two things can blend, as some of these tools will show you. But the reality is, if our brain believes what it sees in VR, that becomes the reality that our body is existing in. Mm-hmm. That's why it has proven itself as a tool for pain management. The FDA, about 2 years ago now, approved that. There's a company from New York called Applied VR that has created a series of different experiences that can be done at home. But quite simply, for people who struggle with chronic pain, they literally can transport themselves to a different place. They can occupy their brain in a positive way, and the pain goes away. It's also been proven efficacious for post-traumatic stress, for anxiety, and for substance use disorders, although primarily so far it's been used in trigger therapy and training people to not respond to the cues that used to trigger them to want to use. There's still lots of different ways to use VR in that context that I think we're still exploring. It's gotten great reviews so far as an in-office treatment tool for people with schizophrenia. It literally allows people who have psychotic breaks to experience their voices in a safe environment, controlled by their therapies while they're in VR, to identify those voices and then to learn how to talk them down. It's also been very helpful and proven for empathy. They've used it to, for example, to train abusers, domestic violence abusers, to have empathy for some of their victims. It's been used in a number of contexts to teach about implicit bias and racism, and giving people a chance to truly walk in someone else's shoes and experience how it feels to be discriminated against based on race. So it's got lots of powerful tools and purposes, and I think we're still at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what all it can provide. And with Meta coming, that'll keep growing it as well. Next slide. So when you think about how could VR help my population, there's a lot of different ways. Stress reduction. We know that folks, particularly folks who have been incarcerated and are returning to community, there's high levels of stress, trying to reconnect with family, trying to find jobs, trying to deal with basic human needs, food, transportation. All of those things can be overwhelming and cause people to relapse. Help them better learn new tools with stress reduction through meditation in a VR environment. It can be helpful for trauma-informed care. It can teach self-efficacy, allowing people to visualize themselves in positive ways, to live that out in a virtual environment, and then translate it into a real environment. It can be incredibly powerful for skill building and training, mental wellness, navigating change. All of those are applications that can take on a more powerful role, regardless of people are where they are, by the way, in terms of their own educational background in a VR environment. Next slide. So what I'm here today to tell you is where we started. There are digital tools that can be of great benefit to your population, both in terms of promoting recovery and, from your perspective, reducing recidivism, reducing costs, and keeping people from returning back through the system and cycling through. So we look forward to hearing more from all of you. Invite your thoughts and comments. And my thanks to both Molly Gontner and Dr. Fernandez for joining me here today.